So let's get into customer research. The way I like to think about this is there's three parts to this process. There's a before, a during, and an after. And there's a lot of preparation in the before stage. It's just like if you've done market research. I mean, when I first started my career in consulting, I was a market research analyst or associate. A lot of preparation to do that. And so part of the preparation is you got to think about who are you going to be talking to, your sample, right? So I've been in situations where clients say, oh, there's some accounts that we can't sell to, or they're beating us up, and they're sort of like the most challenging accounts. Let's hire Ed to talk value to them, and then we could sell them. No, don't do that, please. That's not how you do this. You want to look at your best customers, right? So usually what I would do is you look for 3 to 5 current customers per ICP or segment. So if you're serving different ones, you have to do more interviews to try to get a sense of whether there's a pattern there. And I think that in the beginning, early stages, you should do these with your so-called friendly accounts, people who know you or are willing to share information about that. You want companies that are familiar with your product, actual experience. Churned customers are also good to look at. Sometimes maybe lost deals, companies that have gone pretty far in the sales process, but then couldn't pull the trigger. But you don't use this with prospects, all right? Because they really don't understand your value. One of my principles of value comes from use. If you've never used something, it's hard to say what's the value of it, right? So this is who you want to talk to. The other part of it is the recruitment and the scheduling, and part of that is expectation setting. So you never position this as pricing research. You never position this as part of the sales process. This is voice of the customer research. You're not talking about pricing. You are interested in pricing, but you're really interested about value. Like what are they getting of value in the product? It sort of shifts that narrative. And to Simon's point, you want them to tell you stories about how they use the product, so you understand what's important to them and what's not. This is not sales, so I usually say right up front, this is not a sales call. Your face will not be on a billboard. I usually record these things, and I'll show you some recordings in a little bit. But it's basically the purpose of learning from the customer. And I think it was Denise who said you should talk to your customers frequently. Absolutely, there should be a voice of the customer program where you're talking about lots of things for your roadmap and as well as overall customer satisfaction. This is the spirit of that. By that, you understand your customers better, which means you understand your value better, which means that you could begin to quantify things better, which means you can price and sell better. So that's the whole point of this. Then when you get that set, you do need to create what I would call an interview outline or instrument. Again, coming from my market research background early in my career, it's a structured discussion, 45 minutes usually, and it's not a survey, a Gallup poll or anything like that. It's not that. It's a discussion. It's highly structured, but the customer doesn't see it as being structured, if you know what I mean. So that's what a good qualitative interview is, a very guided discussion through things. And so before we get into the value piece of it, I will ask them other general questions about their roles, their KPIs. These are all things that give you clues as to what value are and their needs, etc. But the main part is the value discussion, which is the middle of this outline, which is I'm going to focus on. Sometimes I'll also ask questions at the end if there's specific things about pricing policies, etc. But really, value is what you need to drill in on, and is the heart of this particular presentation. And then the other preparation that I would do is finally, before every interview, I try to do a little background research. This is also a very good thing that salespeople should do if they're value selling. They should know something about the customer before they sell, right? They should know some, like, how big they are, and if they're, the key parameters around what drives value. So I will try to collect those, because I'm going to be showing and testing value estimates. And one thing I learned at Leverage Point is that you can't give somebody a blank screen and say, hey, how much do you spend for this, and how much do you have this, and fill in the blanks. People will immediately say, no, I don't know, or we don't have that information, or etc. However, if I show them something that's an estimate, like an industry average, they'll immediately know if it's too high or too low. It happens to me all the time. No one ever say, I don't know what that number is at all. But if I show them something, they know. It's like if you're driving with somebody and you ask them where they're going, and they don't know where you're going, they don't know how to get there, and then you're driving, you go, well, you made a wrong turn. It's that sort of phenomenon with customers. I think it's a human thing, right? Don't want to be wrong, but they have no problems telling other people they're wrong. So you use that technique in this. So there's a little psychology in getting people to open up and to talk about things. So that's the before step. Then we're gonna simulate the during step in just a minute, and then just skipping to the very end, because it's market research, you're going to have to put together your findings, and these findings are very, very good internally to show, like, why are we making this decision about the roadmap, or why are we making this decision about our pricing? Are we too high or too low? Are we serving the right customers, or there's a customer satisfaction element? So you get a lot of value out of this sort of study, right? So you have to summarize that. And for our purposes, the things that I like to summarize are both aggregate value estimates for segments, average value estimates per segments, and also what I call raw versus adjusted value estimates. And that's really the thing that I think is kind of new in this. I think is kind of unique in this approach. We look at what's called an adjusted value estimate, not the raw, but what customers really think is real. So that's the approach.